Well, good morning and welcome to ELEVENSES. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and it's show number 160 on Wednesday, the 4th of August. So what have I got for you in today's show? Well, we have a quick look at the Isle of Wight Road Races, which appear to have risen from the dead again. They're now scheduled for the 20th to the 23rd of April next year. There's a new petition out for visible ID for cyclists. I'll ask if your bike is watching you. And something I mentioned last week was a sort of brazen open-air theft of an attempt on a Africa Twin motorcycle. I'll take a quick look at an inexpensive tracker, but also ask what happens to those when the 2G network gets switched off. And finally, we'll finish off with something close to my heart, which is a bit of DIY weather forecasting. So settle yourselves down for the next 30 minutes or so. Ready for today's show. Right, Nick has looked in and so has Guy. Good to see you both. So don't forget you're tuned to ELEVENSES, and I'll be with you for the next 30 minutes or so. Questions, comments, feedback, requests for items to be looked at in a future show. I'm open to them all. Just drop me a line and I'll do my best to respond. All right, okay, so on to the first item of the day. Now, I just need to set up the picture because I forgot to do it earlier. I've left it, where is it? I'll try and find it. There it is, that should come up on screen any moment. With a bit of luck, here we go. If only I'd set that up first, eh? Right, so yes, there we are. That is the Isle of Man. No, it's not. It's the Isle of Wight. Start again. It's the Isle of Wight off the south coast of England. And I had a bit of a will it, won't it moment as I caught up with the very latest news that the inaugural Isle of Wight road races have been given a firm date yet again. Now, this time, with the event back on again, it's been moved to Wednesday the 20th to Saturday the 23rd of April next year. So if you've been following this on-off saga of the proposed road races on the island, you won't be too surprised to discover it's not the date that's moved, but the course too. So the latest iteration of this long saga is that the Isle of Wight road races will originally take place over the 12.4-mile course, which was originally proposed for the Diamond road races as far back as October 2020. Now, as you may know from previous reports on this, the Diamond Races organisation appears to have sunk without trace. Their website is certainly no longer online. The Diamond Races were due to be a time trial style event along the lines of the Isle of Man TT, which is where I got confused earlier, and that they were then rescheduled for October later this year. But with preparations being thrown into disarray by the pandemic and also considerable opposition from local residents, they were then postponed till October, and then once again postponed to 2022 to the April dates, oddly enough. Now, just days after the first date for the original Diamond Races was cancelled, the second organisation emerged, announcing a completely different race to be called the Isle of Wight Road Races. And they were also optimistically planned to go ahead on that October 2021 date. This race would differ by being a massed start with around a dozen riders in each event. The route was claimed to involve fewer properties, but it still involved shutting down a bunch of villages. And came under fire, obviously, from locals. But the paddock for the race event was due to be based at a place called Tapnell Farm Park, which turns out to be an events location in Yarmouth, which is somewhat to the bottom right of the picture you can see with the course on screen. Okay, so what's going on now? Well, back in April, it turned out that whilst the Isle of Wight Road Races had a different pair of what were called primary producers, they turned out to be the people behind the Bestival Pop Festival you may have heard of. The same promoter was actually behind both the Diamond and the Isle of Wight Road Race organisations. And that someone turns out to be James Kay, who I later realised is actually the former British touring car champion. Now, Kay said just the other day, as this new announcement was made, we felt it was sensible to wait until after the national restrictions had been lifted in England before sharing the announcement. We've had 2 false starts already due to the pandemic, and we wanted to avoid further disappointment. So that explains the rapid shift of venue and the switch to the April 2022 date. Presumably the groundwork had already been done by the Diamond organisation, and the new road race organisation simply picks up from where that goes on. Now, the ACU are still backing this new event, but there is a hurdle to negotiate, and that is a 6-week public consultation process. Now, that began on Saturday, the 1st of August. And it basically will explain the format, the timings, the impact on local residents and businesses. Now, it's proposed that the roads be closed from 10:30 to 13:15, and then from 1700 to 20:30 on Wednesdays and Thursday, the 20th and 21st. On Friday, the closure will be from 10:30 to 5:15, and then, so I'll get that right in a minute, 3:15 in the afternoon. And on Saturday, the roads will basically be closed from 9:30 in the morning till 6 in the evening. So that will be race day. Now, rather intriguingly, the event is being billed as a proving ground for sustainable biofuels, which implies that the bikes will be running synthetic petrol. And Kay, in fact, said, the Isle of Wight is an ideal location for us to pioneer the use of carbon neutral fuels that are less harmful to our environment. Our biosphere status encourages us all to learn new ways in which to live on our diverse and ecologically important island. The Isle of Wight Road Races will be at the forefront of promoting future energy technology. So there would appear to be a a push to sell this as a sort of green racing event. Now, a public meeting will be held on the 12th of August, and if this ever does get off the ground, the promoters believe that the race will attract many of the top riders who sort of attend events like TT, and what they call floods of spectators. And comparisons, not surprisingly, are being made with the Isle of Man, where something over £30 million goes into the local economy from motorcycle racing, and it also supports around 800 jobs on that island. So that's the carrot that's being dangled in front of local councils on the Isle of Wight. If you want to find out more about this event, you can find it on the public consultation document, the link for which I am about to put up in front of you. So here we go. There, that's the link for the Isle of Wight Road Races. So, okay, we have, who's looked in? Andy has said hi, Nigel's here, Clive's also looked in. Good to see you, gentlemen. Right, okay, so what else have we got in the news today? Well, another petition to the government. And this one says, in short, the government should require cyclists and e-scooter riders to display visible ID, require that cycle lanes be used where available, and introduce a licensing and penalty point system for all cyclists and a licensing system for e-scooter riders. Okay, pie in the sky, probably. The visible ID idea certainly isn't new. Katie Bourne, who was elected in 2012 as Police and Crime Commissioner for Sussex, said at a public meeting in 2014 that cyclists should wear some form of identification like cars have. So when they go through traffic lights, you can identify them and prosecute them for breaking the law. Nor is the idea restricted to the UK. In 2019, the Tasmanian Motorcycle Council called for cyclists to wear ID numbers so drivers can report them for riding illegally. So basically, you can see that what this is really is it's a vigilante charter. It's another example of people wanting other people not to do things that they don't like themselves. According to the Tasmanian Motorcycle Council, riders should wear a number and have reflective numbering on their helmet. And that identification, they say, could be funded through the road safety levy, which is a fee on vehicle insurance premiums made in Australia, which is then funded, or in Tasmania at least, which is then invested back into road safety. So what suggestions have been made? Well, some have suggested that cycles should have license plates. It's commonplace in Europe. Others have suggested, less practically, probably that a tabard should have a number on it. If you've ever tried to read a phone number off of a rider training school tabard, you'll undoubtedly be aware that the things sort of flap and fold. So it's not exactly the most obvious garment to use. A Guardian article written a few years ago, admittedly by a cyclist, picked lots of holes in the idea, suggesting that it's basically unworkable, unenforceable too. So some of the objections that were raised were a little bit easy to knock on the head. For instance, the writer said, what if you have several bikes, or borrow one, or rent one? Well, if they're number plated, they're actually easily traceable, aren't they? So the you can quite happily follow up somebody if a bike has a plate on it, in the same way that you can follow up who was driving a car or a motorcycle. It's not exactly rocket science, is it? Objections to wearing the tabard are a bit more reasonable, particularly I would imagine when it's very hot. The last thing you really want is a sort of a wind-blocking garment over your cycling kit. Having cycled in the Pyrenees when the temperature was well north of 35 degrees Celsius, I can tell you, you get very, very hot cycling up a mountain, and the last thing you want is any extra layers. And when it's raining, of course, you're likely to put waterproofs on. Do you then put the tabard on over the top? Who knows? Anyway, what other objections are there? Well, would the scheme be for adults only, or would it be extended to include children? If there's an age cutoff, where is it? Who polices the system anyway? And a point the article did make of some interest was that the London Boris hire bikes, which you may be aware of if you're a city dweller in town, they already have numbers on the bike, but a request was made to determine how many Boris bike riders had actually been reported breaking the law. The answer came back as 2, and neither cited the registration number. So maybe the idea isn't actually a goer after all, attractive though it may seem. What happens next? Well, at the moment, the petition has around 7,000 signatures. If it reaches 10,000, the UK government will respond, and at 100,000, it ends up being considered for debate in Parliament. Right, okay, so don't forget you're watching Kevin Williams here with ELEVENSES. You can set yourself a reminder to catch up with the show every Wednesday and Sunday at 11. You can catch up here on Facebook. You can catch up here on YouTube too, because today's show is the second that is going out live on that particular streaming channel. So, okay, that is where you can pick up the show live or a recorded version. So, next question then, is your bike actually tracking you? Now, you may recall that a few weeks back I reported on a fatal collision involving a motorcycle near Bristol. The data extracted from the ECU of the Kawasaki involved in the crash showed that in the moments before the collision actually occurred, the rider was considerably over the speed limit. And that's the first case I've heard of. I dare say there may well be more, but I've just not heard of them, where data has been extracted from the ECU and it's been used to determine the outcome, or at least the prosecution of a court case. But it's fairly likely, I would have thought, almost certain, that digital data will undoubtedly become a major factor in accident investigations in the not too far distant future. Now, I happened to spot a story tucked away in a corner of the press, which I doubt you've seen, announcing that Vodafone Spain have signed a contract to be the communications provider for the Galician electric vehicle manufacturer Ezon. Galicia obviously being part of the Spanish mainland. Under the deal, Ezon's fleet of electric tricycles will be fitted with the latest Vodafone technology for monitoring and for global connectivity management. And Vodafone will put up a dedicated service to extract data from the motorbike's various sensors and components. Now, usefully, that can provide information on vehicle location. It can also provide information on battery status and temperature and power consumption, which is the sort of data that could be fed back into the sort of power management system actually on future bikes. Most of these things can be updated, possibly even over the airwaves. So that's fine if it helps develop the bikes further. But amongst the data being transmitted, it turns out, will be speed, lean angle, and brake execution. So that's also going to tell Vodafone Spain exactly how you're riding the bike. If that data has been recorded, expect it to be revealed on request by the police. So suddenly it's going to be much more difficult to look a policeman in the eye and say very innocently, I was only doing 20, officer. Now, okay, last week you may remember a story when I mentioned there was a brazen attempt to lift a well-secured Africa Twin, which was parked in a bike bay in a busy street in central London in broad daylight. Excuse me, right in the middle of the day. The thieves were actually foiled by passers-by, who included a cyclist who filmed the entire incident, and the fact they were being caught on camera was what persuaded the driver of the getaway van and two others on scooters to exit scene left fairly quickly. And they left the angle grinding accomplice to make a getaway on foot. So if locks and alarms don't deter theft, what might do? Well, one thing I mentioned last week is that I do beg your pardon, I filled my hay fever tablet this morning. I always cough if I do that. So if the bike is moved, you may be able to trace it with a tracker. Now, I did mention last week that if you stick it in an underground garage or in a steel shipping container, you pretty much block the signal. And you can also use a portable jammer to disable anything that uses the GSM network. But many thieves aren't as sophisticated as that, and they simply leave a bike parked somewhere else for a few days to see if it's recovered. So if you do have a tracker, you do actually have a bit of a chance of getting your bike back. Now, many of the tracking services are quite costly. Several £100s for the tracker itself, and then a subscription to the security centre. They take on the job of tracing and recovering your machine, hopefully, for the price. But those subscriptions are often well over £100 for a year. So if you own the top end of the machine, it's probably worth it. It's not going to be a huge proportion of the cost of your bike. But what if you have a machine that's only worth a couple of grand? Or if, like me, you don't actually have theft cover anymore because you live in London and you can't get it if you don't have a garage? Well, the answer may be a self-contained unit, which cuts out most of the subscription element. Now, something I've been looking at is the Monimoto system. Now let me just get the picture up on screen. I have got this one prepared this time, so there it is. That's the Monimoto tracker. It's a two-piece unit. The main tracker, which is a sealed component with its own batteries, they are replaceable, but it means two pieces of good news. First of all, you don't need to cut into your bike's wiring to get to it, get it powered up. That's always a bit of a weak spot, as knowledgeable thieves know where to look. And if you try and hide it by slicing into the wiring loom somewhere out of sight, you're going to expose it to corrosion. No matter how carefully you do it, it always seems to cause wiring problems later on in the bike's life. So you don't have to do that, and of course you can just fit it yourself. It's waterproof and dustproof, which does offer you some options about where to pop it. It operates, of course, via the obligatory mobile phone app. The app shows the unit's status, presumably whether it's working or not, battery life, connection, and the location of your bike when it's tracking it. The batteries should last about a year. Now, the standard Monimoto unit is said to work across Europe, but there is a global package if you're thinking about taking the bike abroad or worried it might actually leave Europe if it's stolen, although how you're going to get it back if it turns up in the middle of Africa or something, I'm not quite sure. I do have a few concerns. The first is that the tracker there itself is linked to a separate unit intended to be used as a key fob. Now, if the bike is moved and the key fob isn't nearby, then the alert's triggered and the message is sent to your mobile app. So two things here. What's the range between the tracker itself and the fob? If your bike is parked close to your key, will it actually go off? That's something you'd have to test for yourself. And the second thing, of course, is you'll have to be careful not to lose your fob on the move, or your tracker will go off. And there is still a subscription to pay. It's only £2.70, I believe, at the moment, for the SIM card, basically, which isn't a lot in the grand scheme of things, and you do get 2 months free. The third concern is that Monimoto was originally crowdfunded, and whilst their website reviews page mentions Visor Down, MCN and Ride magazines, amongst others, none of those logos actually link to actual review articles. So it does sort of make you think that they've been recommended by those magazines, but in fact there's no actual review behind it. So what you do get are a couple of videos by influencers on YouTube. You also need to know which model is which. I believe this is the MM5 in the picture there. It's available at a very reasonable price of £149, or a little bit cheaper on Amazon. The other day it was 134 and a few pennies. Now, one concern, the MM5 only works on the mobile phone 2G network. Now, if you have a 2G phone, you must be a fossil, because it's long since been replaced. 4G is the current system. 5G is being introduced rapidly, as you probably know. So in Europe, major networks such as Vodafone have actually announced that they're only going to support 2G until 2025. And so that's the situation in the UK. And that makes me wonder how future-proof your tracker actually is. Now, there is a question mark over whether it will actually be turned off, because it turns out that the smart electric and gas meter systems, and also the EU mandated eCall system fitted to the latest cars, which connects to emergency services in the event of an accident, are all reliant on 2G and 3G connectivity. And both those systems are expected to have a lifespan of between 10 and 15 years. Now, as it's highly unlikely smart meters and those vehicles will get upgraded to 4G in the meantime, it means there will undoubtedly be pressure on the mobile phone networks to keep their 2G and possibly 3G networks supported for rather longer. And one possibility that's been mooted is that the UK's 2G networks operators, there are 3 of them altogether, actually combine to provide a simple single shared 2G network which can be used by these devices. The latest version of the Monimoto does seem to be 7. So it's important, I think, if you do look at one of these, that you check what you're getting. Don't just simply buy the cheapest one, but actually have a look, understand what the mobile phone connectivity is, and that'll give you a bit of a heads up as to how long it's likely to last. All right, okay, don't forget, if you enjoy the show, you can pop over to my Ko-fi page, and over there you can find something of the order of 500 better biking articles. I'm just in the middle of putting the final 2018 articles up right this minute. 2021 are going up as I write them. Tuesdays went up this morning because I forgot to put it up yesterday, frankly. So 2019 and 2020 are still to go, but you can go back to 2014. So there's an awful lot to read over there. Right, what comments have we got in the meantime? We have, I meant to come back to these a little bit earlier. Keith Wheeler says, I hope the road race goes ahead, but he suspects the NIMBYs will kill it. It may be that is the case, Keith. It'll be interesting to see what happens at the upcoming public meeting, says Keith. It certainly will. Sue has looked in and said, hello, good morning to you, Sue. I trust you're not in a field at Thruxton still. Clive has said that he's got one of those, so he transfers it from bike to bike, depending on which one's being used. No complaints so far, and he's had it for a year. That's good to know. He says he has the fob in his airbag waistcoat and it works fine there. Nick has also recommended Monimoto. He says he has two, and he says, as I just did, that the Monimoto 7 is coming out with better future proofing. So there we are. We do have some reviews for you live on air today on Elevenses, which is good to know. So thank you for that feedback, gents. That's very kind of you. Right, okay, so with all that in mind, on to the last item of the day, which is DIY weather forecasting. Now, I always like to try and provide something sort of slightly off the wall for you at the end of the show, just to keep you interested. Now, last week, I flagged up a Storm Evert, which was predicted by the Met Office as a low pressure system was expected to develop out in the Atlantic near Ireland, and was expected to track across the UK. They gave us several days warning of this storm, and so as it was likely to cause severe disruption, I flagged it up on my Facebook page. Now, somewhat to my surprise, the warning was actually downplayed by a couple of the readers, suggesting that it was either exaggerated or it was just likely to be plain wrong. One rider said he preferred to look out of his own window to work out what the weather was going to be, and the other said the forecasts for the area were never accurate. Now, I have to say that the storm actually crossed almost exactly on track. It came across the Scilly Isles and tracked across the south of the UK before exiting over the Suffolk coast and heading out into the North Sea. It delivered heavy rain, it delivered strong winds, and those caused damage and disruption and injuries right across the south of England, just as predicted. So I would hardly say that the Met Office got it wrong. Now, many years ago, back in my dim and distant past, I did actually cover a chunk of meteorology in my master's degree. So I do have a bit of an idea about how forecasting works, and it has improved dramatically. But you know, we can use forecasts constructively when we're riding the bike. And the first thing I would say is if you are forewarned, you are forearmed. I certainly wouldn't have planned a motorcycle training course for that particular day. Although the storm did track a little bit further north across over London than it was actually forecast, it was about 50 miles north. So we didn't get the strongest winds, perhaps. We certainly got very, very gusty weather, and it did rain quite hard too. But on a day-to-day basis, how can we forecast rain for ourselves? Well, the weather forecast obviously is the first place to start, but have a look at the weather and try to understand how it works. There are two main systems associated with rain. The first one is a frontal system. Now, these are the sort of conventional depressions, the sort of spiral masses of cloud that you see on the weather map, with bands of rain that travel east normally from west rather to east across the country, although if there are specific air masses in play, they can move in different directions. They often come up from the south in summer, but general track of weather across us is from west to east. Now, these frontal systems are usually associated with bands of rain. The bands are relatively thin in one direction, but they spiral up towards the center of the low pressure zone, the depression. So if you travel across the band, you can be out the other side in an hour. But if you travel along it, as I memorably did one summer day when I was riding down to the Pyrenees, I spent the virtually entire journey from the North French coast to the mountains actually sat under this rain band. It basically rained from noon till noon. The only time it didn't rain, bizarrely, was when I was actually in the tent for about 3 hours when I actually managed to get some dry weather. But yeah, by about 4 o'clock in the morning, the rain had moved and caught me up again. And it rained all the way down to the Pyrenees until about the last 30 minutes of the journey when the sun came out. I was soaked, and by the time I got up to the hotel, I was actually cooked as well. I was boiled in the soaking wet riding kit. Now, the good news, though, is that those frontal systems are highly predictable, and you can watch those form on the weather maps, and you can predict pretty closely where the rain is going to be. The unpredictable weather is caused by showers, and they tend to happen in the summer, not necessarily always in the summer, but they are more likely in the summer than at other times. And they happen when the sun heats the land. The sun's high in the sky, the land warms up, it heats the air above it, the air rises, and it forms cumulus clouds. Now, in good weather, these are the fluffy sort of white fair weather cumulus clouds, they're called, which we see dotting the sky. But if the conditions are right, they do actually form into much bigger clouds, something not dissimilar to that. That is what's known as a cumulonimbus cloud, and the sort of the anvil head on that cloud is in the indicator that what you're looking at is a thunderstorm forming. So those clouds, those cumulus clouds, can develop and turn into rain clouds. But if the conditions are right, those big towering thunderstorm clouds form. And that's when you're likely to get thunder and lightning and, of course, torrential downpours. Now, here's the real problem. The Met Office and the BBC weather forecast and any other forecaster worth his salt or her salt can predict that showers will happen. They can even predict that thunderstorms are likely. They can even give you an idea of a band along which those storms will occur and roughly where it will move to and how fast it will move. But what they can't predict is exactly where those storms are going to be. And so basically all that they have to do is be 20 miles out with a forecast of a thunderstorm forming, and you can look out the window, and for you it'll be a beautiful sunny clear day with no rain at all. 20 miles away it'll be absolutely tipping down. That happened, in fact, just the other week. We had storms forecast for London, and if you were up in the Edmonton area, which is about 10 miles from here, you got torrential rain and roads were flooded and water was pouring down into basements. And if you were down in the sort of Pimlico area across towards, I think it was Kingston area of South London, if you were down there, you had similar conditions. Here, we were in northwest London, pretty much halfway between the two. We had a bit of rain, we had a few cracks of thunder. It wasn't enough to dampen the garden, and I still had to go out later that evening with the hose pipe and get the vegetable plot watered. So the trouble is that you cannot give an accurate forecast for summer showers and storms, and the only way you can do the job is to look at the clouds yourself. So to try and to tell whether there is a front on the way, look at the clouds. If they're flat and they're fuzzy and they're sort of grey and they gradually veil the sun and get thicker, that tells you a rain band is approaching. Generally, the clouding starts about 12 hours ahead. But by the time you get to the point where the sun is being obscured by the cloud, then you're generally 3 to 4 hours in front of the rain. But those tall, towering clouds, the cumulonimbus that I just showed you, those are the ones that are indicative of thunderstorms. So those are the ones that you really want to steer around if you possibly can. One of my favorite websites is raintoday.co.uk. I'll just put the link up for you. Have a look at that. Unfortunately, the bad news is they're shutting the site down. There are other sites available which offer weather radar, but this is probably the clearest and the easiest to read. It shows you the rain up to about 15 minutes behind. So it shows you a little video of moving images so that you can actually see where the rain is falling and where it's developing and if it's fading away as well. So it's very easy to look at that site and work out where the rain's going to be for at least the next half an hour, and usually for a couple of hours ahead. And it's one I use all the time. Right, okay, that's it for another show. Do look back in on Sunday when I'll be back with the next one. Sue has just said nope, she's not in a field, and says thank you for the show. You're more than welcome, Sue. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope everybody out there has enjoyed it. Stay safe out there, and hopefully you'll look back in on Sunday to catch the next one. So Kevin Williams from Survival Skills Rider Training and Elevenses saying goodbye and stay safe out there.